Hello, welcome to Networking Field Day 14. We are here at the offices of Big Switch Networks. The presentation that you are about to see is attended by a group of invited delegates who represent the best and brightest minds in the networking industry. They will be offering comments, discussion, and their views on the technology of the company that you are about to see. If you'd like more information about this and other events, please go to our website at techfieldday.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday.
Okay, excellent. Well, great. My name is Arkadiy Shapiro, Technical Marketing here at Big Switch Networks. Been here for about a year and a half, primarily focusing on the Big Cloud Fabric product, and especially our VMware solution, which we'll be talking about today. One of the reasons I'm very excited about presenting at NFD is you guys tell it like it is. So I'm loving all the interaction we're having here and also on Twitter. So hoping that we're going to have an interactive discussion about what we're doing here, how we're helping both the network admins and VM admins. And of course, I'm here. We can talk offline and continue the conversation on Twitter and other social media tools. But we had a little flashback to the past NFDs. I think Kyle mentioned that we've presented at 5 NFDs. And I want to take you back to NFD 10 when we first introduced our solution with VMware. At that time, we really established it as one of the key use cases for Big Cloud Fabric. And over time, we've been adding automation functionality and visibility functionality primarily for vSphere, but also we've been adding value-add features for other VMware products, right, such as NSX, vSAN, and the vRealize suite. So this is taking us to 2017. We're in January 2017, and we've built a comprehensive solution for VMware where we have touch points, we have integration with all these different products, right, such as vSphere, NSX, vSAN. And through those integrations, we're providing both visibility and troubleshooting tools for network admins and VM admins. Okay. Diving a little deeper on vSphere, we have customers using the solution who are at various stages of their journey towards the software-defined data center. Some of them have really built a converged IT team. They have really embraced the SDDC. They're ready to go. And others are taking a little bit more time, and they have still separate silo team. There's a network team, and there's a VM team. Our philosophy when we're building the solution, and frankly, when we're building the product, is really to walk with customers at their own pace and help them break down some of those information silos that they may be having. Okay? Now, the question is, how do we do that? First of all, is through the ready-to-deploy fabric automation. Now, when we talk about fabric automation with respect to VMware, we're not talking about scripts. We're not talking about templates. We're talking about something that's ready to go. Right? So you can spend more time on more important things about security, network orchestration, things like that. Right? Things that are mundane, things that you keep doing day in and day out, attaching hosts to the network, configuring layer 2 segments, making sure that your policy is consistent as your virtual machines move. You don't want to deal with that again. Right? So we take care of that for you. Now, with automation comes the need for visibility. And in terms of visibility, we give visibility for network admin and for the VM admin, and we try to give them the same view, same pane of glass, right? So that as they're looking at the same things, my network admin, through the BCF CLI or GUI or REST API, they can actually see what's going on the virtualization infrastructure. Right? So virtual machines, ESX host, virtual networking. They can troubleshoot VM to VM traffic. They can troubleshoot VM kernel to VM kernel traffic. And similarly for VM admin has a really good grasp of what's happening on the virtualization. But when it comes to physical networking, oftentimes they have absolutely no clue. So what do? Well, we built this nice little plugin for vSphere Web Client that actually gives the physical networking view to the VMware admin. And by the way, gives them the same troubleshooting tools that the network admin is used to. Right? So we have a thing called test path, which we'll be talking about in the demo. The same test path functionality that shows you a hop-by-hop traffic can be used through the VMware vSphere plugin that's coming from the Big Cloud Fabric.
Are you going to demo the lag formation? Is this something you're going to get into? Because I don't want to ask if you're about to get into it.
Yes, I will. Okay. All of that's coming in a demo in about maybe 1 or 2 more slides.
OK, great.
OK, excellent. So virtual pods is one of the key technologies for Big Cloud Fabric, allowing us to build secure pods, secure in terms of data plane, control plane, administration plane. And when we're connecting multiple vCenters to the fabric, in this case, in my demo, I have one vCenter connected to the Big Cloud Fabric controller. It's running vSphere 6.0. And by the way, it's happening to run vSAN, right? So VMware hyperconversion technology. And there's another vCenter running vSphere 6.0 with NSX. Okay? And the third one, well, we've just deployed vSphere 6.5. All of this stuff you could be doing for test. You could be actually hosting multiple customers. We have a couple of clients that are doing this hosting, right? So they're hosting vCenters for customers. And obviously, customers have different requirements. Some are using NSX, some are using vSAN, some are maybe using both, right? All of this can be built in a separate kind of secure pods. And of course, each vCenter has a set of hosts that are associated with that vCenter. Okay? So demo time. And I'll start with a quick overview of Big Cloud Fabric. For this portion, I'm actually going to put a network admin hat. So, because we're network admins, so we're looking at the Big Cloud Fabric. And later on, we'll see if the hat changes. Right? So what do we have here? Right? This is the Big Cloud Fabric. This is the front view of our graphical user interface. You basically see the information on the controllers and the health, memory, CPU of all the switches. So Kyle talked a lot about the one big switch analogy. And this really comes into fruition here. When you look at this, you're looking at one big switch. Right? Especially when we go and look at the fabric, we're going to see this one big switch disaggregated into a leaf spine network. Okay? Now, what we're making sure here is we have an intent that's built into the product where all leaves have to be connecting to all spines. Right? Because if you got a leaf that's perhaps not connected to one of the spines, you don't want that to happen. Right? So here, we're showing that all the leaves are connected to all the spines. I'm not actually sending any traffic. If I were, I would see some traffic here. Right? And the leaves are sitting there in pairs. Basically, one rack has two leaves. Okay? If I want to go look at one of the switches, and this is one of our open networking switches. Right? We're building the fabric based on open networking switches. This is one of our key building blocks. So here I have a switch. I can actually see the live view of that switch, which ports are up, which ports are down. You'll see some environment information for the switch, right? Fans, sensors, power supplies. We can do stuff to the switch. We can kill it. We can reboot it. Right? We can beacon it. You guys ever seen beacons, big flashing lights? Okay. So keep going for the Big Cloud Fabric. Connected devices. Who is talking to our fabric? If you look at traditional networking, how would you find that out? You probably do like show CDP neighbors, show DP neighbors, Cisco switches, ESX hosts, and whatnot are connecting to the fabric. Okay? Too cumbersome. Too many commands. And by the way, you have to do them box by box. Remember, we're one big switch. We do it in one place through the CLI or through the GUI. So here, for the GUI, I'm actually seeing all of the devices that are connecting to the fabric, right? Regardless of whether they're being discovered through LODP or through CDP. Okay? So all my ESXi servers, there might even be a Cisco switch somewhere here. Oh, well, there's a Cisco switch. Guess what? So very easy to use, very easy to kind of to see all your devices that are connecting here and troubleshoot, right, if things are not being discovered. Okay? Now, what is actually sending the traffic in the fabric? We have this concept in Big Cloud Fabric called endpoints. Endpoint is more than just a MAC address by itself or an IP address by itself. If you're trying to look at who's connecting to my fabric, who's actually sending the traffic, well, typically you would go and see, OK, look at my MAC table, look at my ARP table, try to correlate the two together, try to do it on multiple boxes. None of that stuff is happening here. Right? So we have a concept of an endpoint. An endpoint has IP address. It has a MAC address. And through our integration with VMware, we're actually populating a lot of additional information for this endpoint. For example, right, in this field, we're actually showing you the VM name that's coming from the vCenter. Okay? So pretty cool. And I'm seeing that, hey, is this VM even connected? I know this VM is running on the vCenter, but it's not sending any traffic. Right? How often would you get this kind of information? Right? Typically, It's either there or it's not, right? The MAC address is either learned or it's not learned.
So you can query on the VM name if if the guys over the infrastructure side say, hey, I've got this VM. You can go into your query panel and just hunt that guy down.
You
and see
bet.
what's going on.
So I have a VM called Ubuntu. I queried, I found. And you might be noticing there's some errors here. We're going to be talking about errors in a few minutes. Okay. So last thing on the basic big cloud fabric is this logical networking that we have, the tenants and the segments. So tenant is our concept of layer 3 separation. Right? So if you folks used to traditional networking VRF, something very similar here, right? Except we try to use terms that are familiar to application folks. Right? So we have a tenant here called NFD, and then inside the tenant I have multiple segments, which are layer 2 separation construct. Let me try to zoom out so we could. Yeah. OK. So inside this tenant, I got 3 segments, one for app, one for DB, one for web. You'll see this kind of a green line. So the app segment is actually connected to a logical router. My intent is for the segments to be connected to a logical router to enable routing. Some of the segments are not connected, so I'm showing you visually kind of with a dashed line. Okay. So that's it as far as the basic big cloud fabric. Hopefully you guys get a chance to look at the product through our BSN labs. So now let's dive into the VMware integration if there are no questions. Okay. All right. So here, if you guys have seen my prior slide, I'm connected to 3 vCenters. Each vCenter is mapped to its own virtual pod. They're all healthy. They're all running fine. You can see host names, IP addresses, the versions of the vCenter. So if you've got a bunch of vCenters, we support up to 20 today. Some of them are running 6.0. One is running 6.5. Again, just like you could query the VMs, you could query who's running 6.0, who's running 6.5. And a few other things here, right? Plugin. I mentioned the plugin once already, and we'll see that in the demo. We're seeing the versions of the plugin. Version of the plugin typically goes together with the fabric. If the version is mismatched, right, you'll see this information over here. So now, let me put on my VM admin hat, because my VM admin is actually having some trouble today. The demo gods are not nice to him. So the VM admin goes to the vSphere web client, something that's hopefully familiar to most of you. And you'll see a bunch of ESXi servers and a bunch of VMs. So I have this server 1, right, called ESXi1. I have a server 2. And I have a server 3. And I'm looking at this VM called CentOS1. I'll go to the console. And apparently, I have no connectivity to the Ubuntu VM, the one I was just searching earlier. So how often does that happen in the organization? Right? Pretty often. Oops, I have no connectivity. The question is, how long would it take you to troubleshoot this? For some people, it takes hours. For some people, it takes days. It all depends on how big the problem is, actually how many problems are there. Because we actually may have a couple of different issues here, as you will see. Some of them on the virtualization side, some of them on the networking side. So let's see if we can fix it. Okay. So VM admin cannot ping. We open the ticket. Oh my God, we have a problem. Right? So what can the network admin do? What can they see? Well, first of all, we would try to go to our interface groups. And interface group for us is similar to a lag or an MLAG. Right? So if you guys look at this diagram over here, I've actually drawn up how the server is connected. So the server is dual home to 2 switches, and the switches are connected to a spine. Right? So obviously, if a server is dual home to 2 switches, it's an MLAG. If it's only connected to 1 switch, it's a lag, right, with 2 links. Now, I'm constructing the lag based on discovering the server through LODP or CDP. And if there's no LODP or CDP enabled on the virtual switch, there's not going to be a lag. There's not going to be even a physical connectivity. There's no point to do ping for the fabric. There's no point in going to different switches and seeing if things are learned. The physical thing is not even up. Right? And we can see that here. Right? You can see the error saying that virtual switch, LODP, CDP advertisement not enabled. Right? So that's our first problem that we need to fix. So let's try to go to the vSphere web client and actually fix it.
Now, are you anticipating this work being done by the VM admins, the network admins, or are you anticipating they will converge into one big happy family and all work together on this?
So, good question. So, as I said, we will work with customers at whatever pace they have. The customers that have a single team, they just love the stuff because they're like, I can see the same thing in more places, right? The customers who have separate teams, then yes, they have to have a little bit of back and forth, right? So if the network admin is able to detect things, yes, they would have to tell the VM admin saying, OK, you control the vSphere web client, you go fix this problem, right? But it's about finding that problem quickly.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Denise. OK, so I'm going to fix this problem. And you would think that once the physical networking is fixed, everything should be good. Well, guess what? Things are not very good. Okay. So we're still having a problem. Now, the question is, what do I do? VM admin is still unhappy. We still have no connectivity. Go back to the network admin and see what other information I have on my network to be able to narrow down this problem. So back to my network admin hat. Let's look at our visibility screen for the vCenter. So we built this visibility screen to give you some nice real-time visibility for the network admin as to what's happening on the virtualization infrastructure. So you'll see some nice data here, summary of what's happening on the vCenter, hosts, virtual switches, endpoints, networks. Some nice graphic that allows you to filter this based on hosts, virtual switches, and see everything that's running behind that virtual switch on that particular host, right? And there's lots of different kind of dashboards and tables here depending on how you're troubleshooting the problem. Now, what I want to do is actually want to go to this endpoint dashboard because really I'm focusing on the endpoint. I'm trying to ping this VM called Ubuntu 1. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with it. Well, guess what? I search for this VM here. And what I'm seeing is that this VM is powered off. Okay? How often does that happen? Again, you might be managing hundreds of VMs, figuring out that a VM got accidentally powered off. It can happen, right? So we're able to figure this out here. Again, let's go put back my VM hat. And I'm actually going to try to power it on. Okay. Now, while it's powering on, what I wanted to show you is the second piece of the automation that we do. Okay. So we're in the segment view. So the segment is mapping to a port group on the vSphere side. Right? Each port group on the vSphere gets an automatically configured segment on the big cloud fabric. And I have segment membership. Think of a segment membership as something like putting a VLAN on a trunk. You don't want to trunk all the VLANs at once. You only want to trunk if there are workloads on this particular server. Now, I had no workloads before. This Ubuntu VM1 that was powered off is the first workload in that particular port group that's corresponding to a segment. So now that I'm bringing this up, I actually should see one more server showing up over here. Okay? So you see this server 3, where this Ubuntu VM was residing, actually got powered up. Right? And it got connected to this particular segment. Right? So this is one of the pieces of automation that we do. But you've probably been noticing that as I was going through, there's still a few errors to fix. Okay? So let's try to go and see what else is missing here. What other problems we have? Okay. First of all, on the screen, we can try to see if VM is really shown that it's powered on. We'll just do a quick refresh. And guess what? VM is powered on, so we're good on that. But we have a couple of other errors. One is VM adapter not connected. Well, that's pretty easy. Again, I screwed up, or somebody screwed up, and this didn't connect the VM adapter to the port group. We can fix that. We'll do that later. But the other one is more interesting, is this mixed IP hashing concept. So going back to this diagram over here, if you guys are familiar with virtual switching on VMware, typically each port group on the virtual switch has its own teaming mode configuration. Right? And you can do things like IP hash based on MAC, based on virtual NIC, and things like that. Now, I want to have a simple network. I want to have virtual switch and 2 uplinks going to the big cloud fabric. What I don't need to do here is say something like a port group over here connects using this physical link, and another port group connects using another link. I have 2 10 gig links or 2 40 gig links, and they're connecting to the fabric. Very simple. So what I need to make sure for the traffic to flow properly is that all the port groups have the same teaming mode. Right? On the VMware side, we cannot do that because each one has its own configuration. So how do we do that? Right? Either the teaming mode has to be IP hashing, which means that there's an MLAG configured on the big cloud fabric. And once all the port groups have the IP hashing mode, we'll configure an MLAG. Or what some of our customers do is they say, you know what, I don't want to have an MLAG. I will just do an active standby. And again, we have to have a consistent teaming mode configuration on all the port groups. So that's what I'm showing here. And let's try to go and actually fix all those problems. First of all, I'm going to try to connect my network adapter. OK, so silly mistake that we did. And second of all, we have this virtual switch, so I need to figure out which port group actually has the non-IP hash teaming mode configured. So this one looks OK. Oh, this one seems to be a problem. I'm going to try to fix this. I'm going to set it to IP hash. And this is probably something that I've seen happening in my lab and also with the clients that I work with most often, right? Just having this inconsistent teaming mode. So now I fixed this part, but still stuff is not working. OK, what now? Let's try to actually go to the big cloud fabric and see if the traffic is flowing through the network, right? Because we've fixed the basic connectivity, we've fixed the VM. What else could it be? Now, we have this tool called test path, which is showing you the actual hop-by-hop path through the network. Remember, one of the key differences is that we're not showing you all the paths. The challenge in the spine leaf networks is, seeing all the paths is not that interesting. I want to see the actual path that that particular flow takes. So I have a predefined test configured here. And this predefined test actually has source IP for this VM CentOS 1 and another destination IP for the VM Ubuntu 1. So what we're going to try to do is we'll try to do a simulation. Simulation is just talking to our controller and asking, hey, what do you expect to happen? Are these flows even installed? Should the traffic go through? We're talking to the controller like it's a supervisor, right? This is our central brain. OK, so I talked to the controller, and guess what? I figured out that the traffic would not flow. Why it wouldn't flow? Because the traffic would be dropped based on policy. So I have a policy that's configured on the fabric that's actually denying all the traffic. Again, I was messing around. I configured the policy. There are no rules. No rules means implicit denial. OK, so I'm blocking everything. OK, how silly. So let me just try to fix this by doing the permit any. That's not a very good security thing to do, but we don't have time. We're just going to make it work, right? And then you'll get the security guy to do a proper policy, right? So I would fix that. And before I fix that, one thing that I wanted to show you is if I put my VM admin hat for just a second. Remember the VM admin has this plugin view, right? They have a plugin that's coming from the big cloud fabric. They would be able to do the same test path as we were doing on the big cloud fabric and see that, hey, the traffic is dropped by policy on the big cloud fabric. Pretty cool, right? So how often, again, does a VM admin get this kind of visibility into the physical network?
You got to get them on the phone first.
Exactly. You got to get them on the phone. You got to sit together and troubleshoot, right? So here, this information at the VM admin's fingertips, right? If they happen to be finding this problem first before the network admin, well, guess what? In any case, you're troubleshooting together, right? Whether you're sitting in one combined team or you're sitting in separate teams, by getting the same visibility, you're able to troubleshoot things quickly. Okay? So let me go back to my network.
Oh, flip it. That's VM.
That's VM. No kidding, huh? Wow, somebody's paying attention.
That was a test, right?
Yes, yes, very good. Okay. So I'll go back to my network. I'll actually fix this. Oh, Denise is paying attention. Very good. And guess what? Stuff's working. Okay. So simulation worked. I want to actually see whether the physical traffic is going through. For that, we'll do a test. So I would go to this test again, and I would run the test. What we're doing here is we're setting up checkpoints on each hop for that particular flow in the fabric. And we're trying to see whether that traffic is flowing. So my connectivity is working, but I want to be absolutely sure that the fabric thinks it's working as well. So as I'm doing this test, ping is going through. We should be fine. We have a few seconds left. And to see if packets have been seen at each of those hops, leaf switch, spine switch, and the destination leaf switch. Okay. So guess what? Things seem to be working, right? We can actually see the hop-by-hop path. So traffic's coming in on this interface 3 on switch R101, egressing Ethernet 49, going to this interface on spine 1. As I hover over, you'll see kind of a more detailed information on the left side from each of those hops, right? And you'll see how many packets have been received here as well, right? So something, more of a data plane troubleshooting. I received 30 packets here, but maybe I received 28 here. Okay, do I have a bad link? Do I have a bad optics? Something kind of a little bit flaky. You know exactly where to check. Okay? So things seem to be working okay. Guess what? I fixed my problem. But that's not all. Okay? So the other class of problems that we typically see are not just, OK, things don't work, fix it. But they're more about, I've been having intermittent connectivity. How can I detect that? Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. My application is misbehaving. Or I want to do some forensics and figure out, well, when did the problem happen? And why did the problem happen? Right? Because the problem is not happening anymore. So what can we do? So by going to the Fabric Analytics, so in the Big Cloud Fabric, we have this tool called Fabric Analytics. Right? This gives you a historical view of all the events that are happening on the fabric, as well as the events that are happening on our orchestrators. Right? So when we connect to vSphere, we're pulling logs from vSphere. We're pulling logs from vSAN. We're pulling logs from NSX to give the network admin this kind of visibility. When we do containers, right, and Ganapathy will talk about containers, we're getting information about container events, right, on the container infrastructure. When we do OpenStack, same thing is happening. Again, it's about giving that consistent visibility for the VM teams and for the network teams. Okay? So what kind of things we can see here? If I've been having intermittent connectivity, I've checked a lot of things in my fabric. Things seem to be OK. I may have seen some MAC moves, but I really don't know if MAC move means a vMotion or not. So by going to this vMotion tab, I can see what's been happening here. Right? So these are all my VMs and vCenters. And clearly, this Ubuntu VM, this nasty VM that I've been trying to ping, and finally I fixed the ping, it's been having an additional set of problems. Right? By looking at the SPI, you can see that a lot of issues were there. And you'll see that this VM has been vMotion quite a bit. Now, obviously, you have to figure out why that is happening. But knowing that something is happening with this VM could be because of somebody is really doing vMotion. Somebody attacked your vCenter and just starts vMotioning back and forth. Or maybe some misconfigured settings on the DRS. Any of those things are possible. And I've seen those happen with customers. Right? VM admin can detect it. But guess what? Now the network admin can detect those issues too. And again, they can come to a quicker resolution. Other things that are interesting on this analytics dashboard. If you look at NSX networking, what's happening on our NSX? So remember, I have multiple virtual pods. One of the virtual pods in the big cloud fabric is running NSX. And in terms of NSX, NSX is an overlay. We're the physical network, we're the transport, we're the underlay. So I can see here all my logical switches, my virtual machines, and all the events that are happening. Getting information like logical switch mapping to VNI to an actual virtual machine. Closing that visibility gap between the underlay and the overlay. Right? The physical network admin can actually see what's happening on the overlay for the first time. Okay. And finally, in terms of forensics, I mentioned vSAN a couple of times. So we have the dashboard for vSAN. And what my VM admin is telling me is that I've been having some problems. My cluster has been unstable. Typically, vSAN creates a cluster. You enable the cluster on the vSphere side, and you set vSAN to be kind of enabled on this cluster. Okay? So my VM admin is telling me that the cluster has been having some problems, but now it seems to be OK. But this is really not cool. I want to know why. I want to know what's been going on. So I could try to filter, because I know that the problems have been happening today, so maybe in the last 24 hours. And here we see our vCenter. We see our vSAN clusters. Right? I've just enabled vSAN on one of the clusters. And all the hosts. Now, clearly, this host has been kind of getting the lion's share of events. So if I try to filter on this host, I can see what's been happening with this host. So this is interesting, right? Somebody's been messing around with the VM kernel. So typically, how vSAN works is they require a vSAN to be enabled as a service on the VM kernel. Now, somebody's been enabling it, disabling it, enabling, disabling it. Is it a malicious user? Is it a script? Of course, we have to figure that out. But we now have visibility of what's actually been going on, right? That could be your clue. That could be your kind of a root cause of the problem. Okay. Any questions, folks?
You've shown us
We're wrapping up.
visibility
Yes.
into the VM admin and the network admin tools from the opposite tools, but you did all the break fix within the native tool.
Can you say it again? Yeah.
You fixed things on VMware within the vCenter, and you fixed things on the Big Cloud Fabric from
Yes.
right? Is there a future where I fix VMware from within the Big Switch tool and vice versa?
Absolutely. Right. So the question is, would customers like where some of those things, and we've been actually discussing this with engineering, if I have a problem with LODP, can I just click on the Big Cloud Fabric GUI and say, go fix it?
That's what I'm asking. Yep.
I can very well do that. We've been thinking about it. The question is, are customers ready for it? Some are, and some are not. Right? And as I said, right, we're trying to walk with customers at their own pace as they move to this journey of having this one software-defined data center, having this one converged team. Right? So it's absolutely possible. Right? There's nothing in the product that would prevent it. But we're trying to kind of work with customers and see if they would find that valuable. Sounds like you would find that valuable. So great, great feedback.
I think it's a good point. I mean, so where do you guys see this going? At some point in the future, someone is going to have to take control of the data center, right? Somebody has to take ownership of it from a platform perspective.
Yeah.
Where do you see this landing? Is it? I mean, right now there's certainly a division. As your hats have shown. Where do you guys see this going? In the future.
I think we're definitely seeing that more customers are receptive of doing things like what you just mentioned, right? Being able to fix things without going to the other tool. Some customers are more receptive on being able to see things, right? I've seen customers where they say, I cannot have my VM guy see anything about the physical infrastructure, right? Then a month later, that customer has been receptive to that. Right? So definitely, things are converging, and customers are more receptive to doing those type of things, both in terms of configuration. Right? So I'm configuring the virtualization side from the Big Cloud Fabric, and also in terms of visibility. Right? And configuration can go the other way, where I'm configuring the fabric from the vSphere Web Client plugin.
In my mind, this is one of the areas that it's holding the data center back. At some point, this idea of fabric is important, right? In order to kind of have this concept where we're able to let have one control over all of our IT resources. Someone has to be in control of it, and this idea that we continue to have verticals that split the management of the network and the compute and the storage isn't going to give us the vision that we want, which is really easy access to our IT infrastructure.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Right? But as I said, right, we try to work with customers at their own pace. If we do something where we completely dump this on a customer and say, you know what, you got to use this one tool and it will configure your network and VM, we wouldn't be having the customer adoption that we have had up until now, right?
Fair enough.
That I can tell you from experience.
So is there a fear in some organizations that you work with that this is too dynamic? Like, oh, I'm going to give all the VM guys this, they can just do whatever now. That's crazy. Is that a fear for your customers?
For some of them, yes.
Yeah.
Right? For some very traditional enterprises, it is a fear, right? And we try to alleviate that fear by kind of taking baby steps with them.
Okay.
Right?
I was just saying, after we originally launched some of the integrations, after they were out in market, we actually had to put in configurations to limit vAdmin's level of control, even though I think everybody agrees on full visibility. And it's a really dynamic situation. I think over the next 2 or 3 years, this is going to change on us a lot, and product-wise, we have to be ready for it.
Is there a possibility that workflow could even go to somebody like, so let's say we want to have this workflow, but it needs to go to security first, and they're going to give us, whether it's an email or however that works, we're going to give this the okay, and then it gets out, that kind of a workflow?
Because the big secure architecture work, we're seeing more and more of these cases in our own products where, it's interesting, the debate that was going on Twitter, I think that Denise really kicked off, is exactly a debate that we have internally over and over and over, the role of the network admin versus the vAdmin. And then our security products, what's the role of the networking admin and the security admin? Who defines the chain and who defines what's in the chain and who defines what's coming in and going out of the chains?
And where the trust is? Who trusts?
And who trusts who to make sure that config is right? We're absolutely seeing this need for a very sophisticated view of the workflows. And at least in the organizations that we deal with, very often, it's actually application by application. So one tenant will have a very different set of workflows than another tenant, even within the exact same organization. It's where we spend a lot of our design debates.
So I think this is kind of where intent-driven, architectures really come into place. Is, how do we model, security compliance, network, all of these best practices and policies, such that so that platforms like this can ingest that and make sure that we're enforcing it.
Given that you're getting this degree of visibility with the overlay and the underlay, are you anticipating or able to do any kind of predictive thing? Like if this configuration change gets made, how is that going to percolate through the network now?
I'm smiling only because this is a question asked for next field day. But let's just say what we have shipping today. One thing that we focused on a lot was how can we do event correlation for the past in a material amount of time. But I mean, how many of us have been in a situation where you're trying to troubleshoot a networking issue and it's just not there anymore and you have absolutely no idea what happened 20 minutes ago? It became really core to us to say, hey, any information you're going to use in troubleshooting, can we make sure that's stored for a week? And can we correlate that to all the other systems and all the other people that could be touching this thing at the same time? So going from that, now that we have the historic data very much built into the product and very much built into all of our integrations, we actually have repositories of the data to start doing more forward-looking stuff now. But we couldn't do the forward-looking stuff until we had actually all of the integrations done for the historic data first.
And also, speaking of visibility, is there a way, because somebody mentioned security policy, is there a way to actually bring policy information into this view as well?
That didn't make it in as part of this demo, but we actually have demos online about exactly that.
Okay.
So Drew, keep in mind, right, there's policies that are configured on the fabric, and there's also policies that are configured on the big monitoring fabric in line. Right? So we're talking about policies right now on the production network. Policies can actually be seen right in both places. Right, the network admin can see it. The VM admin can see my policy configuration through the vSphere web client plugin. Right, so some of that stuff is already being brought in.